Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Spirit Reflections Around the Fire Conversations. My name is Fred Gouveia. This is our second live of the year 2022, episode number 77. And we invite you to like and subscribe our YouTube channel, Spirit Reflections. You can look that up and see a lotus flower. It's very important for us if you help us get the word out so that this kind of content can be spread around to people who might be interested in learning about new concepts. We bring artists, we bring musicians, we bring religious people, spiritual people, and philosophers from all walks of life to talk about their personal and their spiritual journeys and how the tools that they found along the way have shaped the work that they do and who they are today. And today we're going to be talking about music, Johann Sebastian Bach, Bach's spirituality, why that composer is so important in the history of Western music, and some say even worldwide music. And for that, we're going to have Simone Leitão, Dr. Simone Leitão, PhD, one of the most beautiful composers, pianists that I know. I think she does a little composing too, actually. I know she conducts also. And we've had the pleasure of meeting at the University of Miami a few years ago. And Simone has studied under some of the most important professors and piano specialists in 3 continents, Europe, Latin America, and the United States. And she's going to talk to us about Bach, the music of Bach, and she's going to be playing for us in the next minutes. And I'd like to direct all of you that are listening to this that if you'd like to hear more about Simone's life story, we interviewed her recently in November of last year in our channel in Portuguese. If you're watching this, you can go all the way to the description at the bottom of the YouTube channel and you can click on the link for the Portuguese conversation. Soon we're going to have an audio interpretation, like an overdub of this conversation for those that don't speak Portuguese. So stay tuned. Best way to find out is to like and subscribe Spirit Reflections on YouTube so you get notified every time we have new content like this. So without further ado, let's invite our guest tonight, Simone Leitão. Simone, good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And thank everybody. I really appreciate this channel, and I love to be around your lives. And anyhow, yes, I'm here.
Beautiful. I'm also letting everybody know in the description here, but for those that are only listening to this as a podcast, look up Simone's Instagram, Simone Leitão Piano on Instagram. She, every now and then on Sundays, I believe, she does a impromptu live performance on some beautiful hymns on the piano. And she describes the history behind the hymns and she plays it. I don't think there's anything more refreshing to wake up in the morning to on a Sunday than that. So look her up and follow her online. She also has a really cool and entertaining channel on YouTube that provides a lot of educational content about the backstage of classical music, opera, why orchestras are the way they are, how do they evolve, where did opera start, how did it come about. So all of those resources available online. And tonight, we're going to be doing a lot of music and not necessarily just talking. We're going to try to understand, at least on a surface level, why Bach as a composer is so important, and especially his spirituality. What makes it about his spirituality so important to us and has made his music so influential? So I think we should just jump right into it, right, Simone?
Yeah.
Why? Tell us.
Why? I've been always very fascinated by Bach and his life, because first he was the youngest of a large family, and I'm the youngest of a large family. He was Protestant, I'm Protestant, so there's a lot of things, and of course the music. And so I tried to read as many biographies as I could about him. And the most famous of them all is Albert Schweitzer biography. I think you were acquainted with him. And
Yes.
He was also a philosopher and theologian and everything. But Schweitzer used to say something that I find very helpful for you to understand who was Bach in the whole journey of music in this planet. Mostly Western music, but you know, keys everywhere. And Schweitzer used to say that everything that happened in music before him was pointing to him. And everything that happened in music after him was looking to him, was looking back to him. So in a way, he was never an innovator, musically. He lived in a time where Baroque music, and especially where Baroque was at its peak, and basically, when you think about polyphony, everybody was very happy with polyphony, but they were kind of tired of polyphony. It was dying out. And he was so much into it. And instead of making something new or being part of the whole revolution of proto-classical music, he was looking back to Palestrina. He was looking back to... So the moment he looked back, and the same thing happened to Brahms, actually. He became like this huge fire. I can see fire now. But the light, he was light that brought everything that in classical music happened before, so that, he could light up the next.
It's almost like the fact that Bach was able to stay so centered and grounded in his present at the time by using all of the resources that he had inherited from previous generations composers.
Exactly.
In a way, he was able to capture the zeitgeist of his time, right?
Zeitgeist, exactly.
Even though he wouldn't be recognized as such a composer during his lifetime, right?
Yeah, he was basically a servant most of his life. And his son, CPE, Carl Philipp Emanuel, had much more he was much more famous than Bach. And for many years, Bach was seen as, even Mozart saw Bach as like the father of CPE or the father of Johann Christian, because Mozart was a student of Johann Christian. Yeah. So anyhow, but Bach, basically, he never left Germany. He was always there. He could never imagine that his music would cross all over the world. And he's one of the most, if not the most, recorded, studied composer of all times. Beethoven used to say, because Bach, German, because you speak German beautifully, Bach means like a short stream, right?
Like a brook.
A brook,
like a
exactly, brook. And Beethoven said he should be called Ocean.
Ocean, for sure. And
yes.
I so agree with Albert Schweitzer's take on Bach, because I kind of like to compare Bach and to the history of religions to like the figure of Jesus. We had BC and AD, the whole world changed, just like Bach's music has done the same. And I don't think this might be online 10 years from now, and 100 years from now, 200 years from now, if people stumble upon this, it's going to be just as contemporary, I believe, than it is today, because of the power of his music. And I believe that the spirituality, his faith, his devotion are part of what makes his music so important and lasting.
Oh, definitely. Because he was part of a major agenda. He was not just doing his music for his agenda, He first, it's incredible how he could write that many music, so much music, while he was still teaching, and he had so many kids, and he was serving the church, and afterwards he was serving some princes here and there, and he was able to write, and he was basically writing every week a new cantata based on the sermon of that week. I had personally the opportunity to see his Bible in Leipzig, and it's like everything was written. He would really study the Bible, and for Christians, we are one of the religions of the book. So
no, the man totally had a Protestant work ethic and was a faithful Christian as well, not just in his music but outside the music, right?
Yeah, but there's something that is interesting too, that his father was very Protestant Lutheran, but his mother was Anabaptist. I don't know how to say. I think it's like this. It's a more sort of like a Pentecostal, so to speak, like a pre-Pentecostal. So he was more mystic than we would think, because the Pentecostals were, usually they are more empiric in terms of their faith, and so Bach had that, and so he didn't have exactly what we would see afterwards in Wagner's music, which would be leitmotif or something like that. But he did build some atmospheres in his head before. I mean, he really wanted us to have a certain proximity with the Lord, with the Holy Spirit, and he was very intentional, basically, in his writing.
Absolutely.
And if you see, for instance, he never wrote, the only genre that he never wrote in Baroque was opera. He never wrote opera. He could have. Of course, he was mostly working for the church, but he could have written some opera. He didn't want to. That's what Schweitzer says. He wanted to only tell the stories of Jesus, basically, so he could not. But at the same time, he touches the mystic of the romantic love in his cantatas. Every time the soul, usually soul is a soprano or an alto, is singing usually an aria that could be an aria of love. It is singing for Jesus, to Jesus. And Jesus is really usually the tenor who sings,
Right.
and very romantically to the soul.
Oh, I see.
So the soul of humankind in general, and Jesus the Lord. So this is, I love his cantatas, and you can see that this is not me saying, this is Schweitzer.
Right.
So Schweitzer's understanding. So I find another thing that he said too is that, of course, he would use some of the materials of the non-sacred to the sacred and so on and so forth. But what he said is that the only way that one material would be reused, it would be the sacred material would be reused for the non-sacred.
Non-sacred.
So never the opposite.
Never the opposite. That makes sense. And it does make sense that even though he didn't write operas, he did write enough cantatas to emulate the operatic experience, at least with orchestra and singing, vocalists and instrumentalists coming together.
And the drama.
And exactly the drama, like the passions, the John and the Matthew passions that he did are extremely dramatic. You can see it in the fabric of the music. I mean, they're not called operas. They might as well have been at the time, right?
Absolutely.
We're going to have a couple of pieces from a very important body of work that Bach put together, right? And I believe it's so fitting because the year 2022 marks a 300th anniversary of this body of work.
300, right? Can you imagine? 300 years.
Wow.
Tell us. Some people in the pop music world would say that a song that is, was written in 2020 is old now.
Is old, exactly.
Well, tell about the Well-Tempered Clavier. Well, there's a little, just a short story about this book that I would like to share. The Well-Tempered Clavier was written in 1722 when he was working in Cöthen at the in the court of the prince in Cöthen. So he worked there for 5 years, and so for 5 years he didn't write any sacred music, any liturgical music, because he was working in the court. So he wrote a lot of pieces for instrumental. Of course, all these Brandenburg concerti was written there. They were written there, and so he had, of course, many students, and his kids as well, and there was all this thing about temperament, which is basically tuning, right? So the perfect tuning, the equal system tuning, was being just tested, because it was not truly like we have it today. So it was something very innovative. And Bach was always tuning his own instruments, his keyboard instruments. Clavier means keyboard. It can be everything here can be played in organ, clavichord, harpsichord, and later on piano. So he just wanted to show that people shouldn't be afraid of some keys signatures who were completely very untuned in the old temperament and the old tuning system. So if you can see that Rameau, his contemporaries, Rameau, Handel, Scarlatti, they were not writing pieces for the keyboard in all keys. You have just some keys. Some keys are avoided. So Bach said, well, I'm going to write. That's why it is called the well-tempered clavier. Because he said, well, I'm going to write in all the keys, majors and minors, a prelude and a fugue, so that you can see that it can sound the same. It doesn't matter. Because
so
if you have
almost coming from an engineering innovator point of view.
Exactly. And you know that every key has its own personality and its own, the key of the doctrine of affections. If you can explain to your audience, I know that you know that, right?
I don't know the doctrine of affections. Please explain to me too.
Yes, this was also organized during the Baroque period, that each key had could express better a certain feeling or a certain emotion. For instance, C sharp minor is desperation, right? The Moonlight Sonata is written in C sharp minor. And D major is like royal. Most of the coronation, they were written in D major.
Right.
B flat, E flat were keys that you could use more in liturgical settings. A minor, so D minor is very, very spiritual, because it's the closest one to Dorian mode. So you have all of this, and he tries to, he basically has that in every key. He organizes, he shows that he has a certain emotion that he wants to describe. Beautiful. And the thing is that we never find desperation in his music, because there's no such thing as desperation in Bach's music.
There's a man of faith like his.
Yes, there's no evil in his music. He was very intentional with his craft, because he used to say that the music is for one purpose, to glorify God and to
the refreshment of
the soul. Yes. Yeah. And of course, people hate that nowadays, because you cannot say that kind of things. You know, this is so much.
I love it.
Yeah, I
think it's more urgent than ever that we refresh our souls and glorify God in everything that we do, especially the music of Bach, right? Yeah, why don't we go into music then, Simone, so we can feel some of this. You're gonna put your microphone in the piano so that we could better listen to it. And before we go there, give us a little taste of what you're gonna play, please.
I am going to play the first prelude of the first book. Again, he wrote after 22 years after that, when absolutely, it was like 6 years before he died in 1744. He wrote the second book. The second book is, for me, is even more amazing and beautiful. And back then, his sons were saying to him, like, you don't need to write. I mean, this temperament thing is gone. It's like 20 years ago. You know, just get over it. Stop with writing like very complicated fugues and stuff. And then he wrote again for his amusement. And in the beginning of the book, he says, this is just an exercise. He says, just an exercise for the amusement of a student or a professional who would like to entertain himself or herself in the evening of his home. So he didn't have any like pretensions on that, but just remember that when Chopin left to Mallorca to help his health, he just took with him the two books.
The two well-tempered claviers.
That's the only thing.
That's all he took.
Yes.
That speaks volumes.
Yes, exactly. Oh, so I will play the first one, is in C major. It is very simple, if you can think. It is not, there's no problem in terms of technique that you can, but of course you need to have the control of the sound. Later on, in like more than 100 years after that, Gounod, who was a French composer and very Catholic, he wrote a melody on top of that, a melody praising Mary. So it's a good ecumenical thought, if you can say. Okay, I'm gonna take real quiet. Okay. How was it?
Bravo.
The sound. Good,
Beautiful. Thank you. That was so refreshing.
Thank you.
For the
Yes.
next one, I just may I suggest to perhaps you put it a little further away from maybe where the hammers are, because
Oh yes, it was too much.
it was
hammer.
vibrating sometimes depending on the note, but it still sounded beautiful.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, Bach is. It's always new. His music is always new. I can never say, "Oh, now I played it like this. It's going to be like this always." And then again, he was very important for classical composers, romantic, and even Debussy, everybody, Shostakovich, and of course jazz. Jazz musicians used to, practice his music every day.
I think a good word for him is foundational.
Oh yeah, he was
For
foundational.
every other composer that would go after him, and no matter what style and genre, if the composer had any remedial level of training, musical training, they would have been influenced by Bach in a foundational way. So I think we went from. Go ahead.
No, I used to say he is the arrival point where everything started.
The rival point where everything started. Nice. Inflection point, right?
Yes, inflection. Yeah.
So when you started to play, I just started thinking to myself, wow, I never thought of this correlation between a Protestant and the Catholic would sort of come together in this beautiful piece 100 years apart from one another.
Yes.
And it's one of the most renowned melodies in the world, recognizable melodies.
Yes,
right?
because when you start playing, you see, this is purely the music of Bach. So there was no melody. Right. But it really, and you feel like, exactly. So he was a genius. Gounod was a genius. So I would have never thought of touching the music of Bach, but he did.
Yeah.
And I don't think Bach would have, been mad at it at
No,
all.
I think he was helping him somehow in the other side of life.
Yes.
So we go to another whole contrast, like 22 years later, right? And is this from the second book? The next one?
No,
You're
I'm going to just play for the
one?
first book. I'm just
Oh,
going to
okay.
play for the first book because I have this personal thing this year. Since I play a lot of pieces from the second book, and I've already recorded some of it. You can see on Spotify, so people, if they want to,
That's
some
right.
of these pieces are there. And this year, if I feel it's ready, I would like to record some of them, at least half of them. What I'm doing now is that every week I devote, since there are 52 weeks in a year,
Yeah.
and there are 48 pieces in this book. So I am taking 1 week to work on one piece. And so, of course, I'm doing other things. But
Right.
every morning I wake up really early. And I hope I'm not being like too mystic, but I wake up really early, like before the sunrise. And I like to play Bach at this point. And sometimes, really, I start playing Bach. When people visit me, they see, because I live in the mountains, there are many birds. The birds sing much more when I play Bach, but much more. When I play other composers, okay, they're happy. But when I play Bach, it's incredible. They come even closer.
I have no doubt about that, Simone, and I don't think that's not even close of a stretch in mystical conversations. And if it is, you're in the right channel for that.
I know.
John asks a question here: does Bach's books or other books reveal any information about his inspirations from the spirit world, or I guess from heaven or from heavenly sources, or no?
I don't think so. We lack informations about that because he was very Protestant in this sense. He would keep his faith to individual and to private, and because the relationship with God is to be private, but your actions need to impact the world. So this is like the good Protestant mentality. Sometimes
Right.
we don't follow that, but that would be a good Protestant would follow that. So I think he was a good one, and no, he does. But there's one thing you can. The foundation of his music comes from are the chorales and the hymns of German Lutheran Church. And where do these melody come from? This is something very interesting because before the Reformation, the melodies, they were all the basic of classical music it comes from the Gregorian chant, right?
Right.
Which is the root of everything, the root of polyphony and everything. Okay, so then comes the Church Reformation in the 16th century. And what did they do? They said, well, we don't want to sing these melodies that nobody sings and they don't understand, the people don't understand. So the first hymnal, so to speak, of German Lutheran Church came from the streets. They would go to taverns, they would get whatever melody people were singing on the streets, and they would take that melody, so it's very purely German and completely non-sacred. Mm-hmm. They would take that to church and just tweak and change some lyrics, and of course do the 4 parts harmony so that everybody could sing.
Oh, nice.
2 voices for women, 2 voices for men. So then we wouldn't have to have that spectacle, which was beautiful. I find the spectacle of the Catholic Church of the Renaissance amazing, but it was basically a spectacle. People could not actually take part on it. So they were just watching this wonderful theater and drama. And so what they wanted to do in the Reformation was to make everybody take part as a congregation
in the worship service.
So think about it for a moment. What was for about 1,000 years, not 1,000 years, but 600 years, 700 years, the basic, which was the Gregorian chant. Now it's the melody of the people. So it's the folk songs
brought
of
into
Germany,
the Lutheran service and
exactly,
orchestrated into a 4-part harmony so that it could sound beautiful and people can feel a sense of belonging by contributing their own voices to it.
Yes, and so the same thing happened in other countries as they became Protestant, and
Nice.
so yeah, so if you think of it about this, that this is what happened to his music. He would get some of that influence, but also a lot of Palestrina. Palestrina,
Wow.
if you listen to Palestrina, if you listen to Josquin des Prez, exactly these great composers in the time, not Josquin des Prez was before, but Palestrina lived exactly in the time where the Reformation took place, and he was, of course, Catholic.
Oh.
But Bach was looking to his music a lot and the way he wrote melodically. So
Beautiful.
he did have some, yeah. I don't know if I answered his question.
It's cool. We can continue meditating and reflecting on this idea because, you know, it was a good question. Let's keep going because I would love to hear the prelude in C sharp minor.
In C sharp minor. I will take this. Oops. Sorry. What if I put it here?
I think it's going to be good because then it's going to be away from the piano's vibrations.
So C, I was going to play the C minor, but I'll play now the C sharp minor, which is something that I'm learning this week. É lindo, né?
It's beautiful, and the fact that
I'm
it
sorry,
ends.
I said this in Portuguese. I'm sorry.
The fact that it ends on a major key, so unexpected. It's like hopeful.
It is hopeful, yes. It's he does that quite many times, but not always, but many times he does that. The whole piece is very lyrical. He takes the best of C sharp minor. The colors he takes, and then he decides, because every prelude is completely different. You have the prelude that comes before it's completely different, and in the C minor, more clavier-like, more technical. And then all of a sudden he writes something so melodic with three voices. And the fugue of this is terrifying because it has five voices. Completely terrifying.
Wow. So your early morning exercises, are you saying every week you're going to do one of the preludes in the
One
book?
of the preludes or one of the fugues. So
I see.
this week is this prelude. Next week is the fugue, and so on, so that I can have. It's my way of thanking Bach for he did at least 40 minutes, 45 minutes a day. The whole year, I will have this silent celebration.
It's an amazing therapeutic experience for our ears. And I would even venture to suggest, if you ever want to turn on your phone and put it on your Instagram there live, let us know here on the channel, and I'll start letting people know, because to be present there with you like the birds would be really
With the
nice.
birds, yes, I should do this. Yes, I've been pretty good at this morning discipline this past 2 years due to all of this that we're going
Right.
through, and so I'm really like waking up at that certain time to pray, read, and the Bible is so amazing, because even when you're reading the story of the kings of Israel and all their fights and everything, in the middle of it, God just speaks in the middle of the fight with you. There's like exactly what you need to listen in that single day. If you read the same passage some days after, you see other things, not
Right.
exactly what you needed to see. And so I do that exercise, and afterwards, afterwards I don't even drink coffee. I go straight to Bach. And so all of this I do
This is
before.
your morning meditation.
Yes, and it's so good. And the problem is that when I have people over, I tell them, you're going to listen to Bach really early, continue sleeping. I will not play a whole concert. It's just that I need that moment.
Absolutely. That's your
Yes.
alarm for the morning. Simone, there's a cantata. Is that a cantata or a
Yes.
chorale?
It's a chorale from a cantata. Ich ruf zu dir, Herr Jesu Christ. I call to thee.
I
right?
call to thee, right? Yeah.
Yes, I call to thee.
Rufen, right?
Rufen. His cantatas are exactly his most spiritual journey, are all of these cantatas. One of his cantatas he wrote when he came back from a journey, and he came home, and his wife died, and he's a childbirth, and the child also died, and they were already buried because it took so much time for him to arrive, and he didn't even know. So and so he writes that cantata, "Es ist genug," right? This is enough. So it's the most he can be of somebody that is really unhappy with what happened. At the same time, he never loses his faith. Is amazing.
Yeah,
Okay.
before you play, I kind of wanted to go into Das ist genug moment that you've described to us, because as a violinist, this is also what I take when I travel. My toiletry kit and the 6 sonatas and partitas for solo violin by Bach. And the cool thing about this edition is you get to see his original handwriting as well.
Wow.
And it's cool because he apparently published the 6 solo sonatas and partitas for violin after his wife passed away, who was his lifelong companion in every way. And apparently he wrote in the cover of the first published edition, "Sei solo per violino," in Italian, "I am alone," which is a play on word. Instead of "sei soli," which would be the correct 6 solos, "sei soli," he said "sei solo," I'm alone. And there is a lot of tremendously beautiful, lonely parts here in the sonatas and partitas for violin, which, especially the chaconne, I've created this entire imaginative theory in my head, which I have not had anybody prove to me. But until somebody proves otherwise, I really believe that chaconne movement is a love poem to his deceased wife, and all of that intensity of the longing and the sadness of her not being around. And then that middle passage, which is in major, it's sort of like
I love that.
It's almost like him looking back when she was alive and the pleasant moments that they stayed together, you know?
Yes, I should have prepared some of my Busoni because Busoni wrote a transcription for that for the piano, and I also have that on Spotify. I would
Well,
like to.
maybe we can have another episode, maybe second semester of this year in 2022, where we
Exactly.
have another encounter around the fire with the music of Bach.
Yes, definitely. Can I play the other piece now?
Yeah,
Not Ishruf, if you
sure.
don't mind.
Not
If
at
you
all.
don't mind, because we were talking about the whole hymnal of the Lutheran Church, and you asked me to play some hymns.
Right.
And I remember this one. He also had in one of his cantatas. I don't know which one. Or I think, no, he has an for the oratorio, the Christmas oratorio, right? The one that I'm going to play now. We have, of course, we sing, so we have lyrics. So the lyrics were taken from Bernard de Clairvaux, who lived in 1091 to 1153. He was the main, actually, he was the bishop who took care of this southern France monastery that Eleanor d'Aquitaine built for trying to find a theological path for the feminine.
Oh,
He was the
nice.
first one that Bernard de Clairvaux had that. And so he wrote the lyrics, but of course, we're not thinking about the lyrics. The music is from Hans Leo Hasle, who wrote that in 1601. And the harmony is by Johann Sebastian Bach in 1729.
So 1601, I believe, is the year that Hamlet was also published by Shakespeare.
Wow, you know that?
If I recall correctly. And I'm just trying to draw parallels about what was happening elsewhere in the world that year.
1601, yeah.
So repeat to us the dates, please, just so I can
Hans Leo Hasle wrote. He was one of these main composers who took melodies from the folk and the lives of everybody and took it to church. And he also wrote some of the melodies. So he wrote that melody in 1601. Bach wrote the harmony 128 years later. But the lyrics, as we sing the lyrics that come from a Latin text by Bernard de Clairvaux.
Got it.
The Latin text is about, basically, it describes the face of the Lord when he was on the cross.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I was... How was the sound with the?
That was very good. That has
Okay.
got to be one of the most beautiful pieces of music ever written. This, I actually put it on the comments for people to look at later. The exact same hymn that Simone just played, Bach himself used it in his St. Matthew Passion.
St.
And in
Matthew's
that,
Passion.
and in that part that, O Haupt voll Blut von Wunden, which means, O sacred head now
Yes,
wounded. So
exactly.
as the crowd of people are there contemplating in awe and in pain and a mixture of sensations, the crucified Christ, they're sort of lamenting in song at what they're seeing. And I put it on the YouTube, on our comments here, a link to a performance of the St. Matthew Passion of that specific passage, Via Haupt voll Blut von Wunden, that you just played, Simone. It's amazing to see the different ways we can experience the same piece of music, the same melody, done differently with orchestra, with just a cappella chorus, or in your example that you just played for us, simply in a piano passage. I mean,
Yes, it's
just
it is amazing. I usually in our church when we have communion, usually someone's just playing something so that you could reflect while you take communion. And I love to play that. So I play that as many times as possible in many ways, and I never get tired. It's yeah, it's some hymns that basically describe this, yeah, the drama of the cross or the victory of the resurrection, our life. If you think about it for a moment, we inherited the drama of the praise songs from the Jewish tradition. If you take it, the beginning of the Christian singing, we were just basically imitating what they did. And then it took other forms as Christianity took other places. And so you finally get to Gregorian chant, which is basically a mixture of many chants. You had the chant of Rome, you had the chant of the Carolingian, especially Metz, which is afterwards became Paris. So if you think about it, that the beginning, the foundation was Jewish, and the Hebrews used to sing from many centuries ago. Before that, they used to sing psalms and hymns with more private, intimate, and really drama with God. They would tell everything, in the Psalms. If you see what is written, when you see the David Psalms, he was also a musician. So
right.
so the main king of Israel was a musician as well as a warrior. And so, of course, there we can only see the lyrics, but he makes a lot of cues how you should. Some songs, there are cues. Here, the psaltery should play, and here you should have this and that. But anyhow, this is just something that I've been working on, reading on how early Christians used to sing. And I've been really digging into this. So this is something that I love to study. Of
Yeah,
course,
and
I'm
it's so
as a
central to
hobby.
all. Yeah, and it's so central to all kinds of worship all over the world. Any place in the world, any time of history,
Uh-huh.
you see that the role of music is central to worship, to a religiosity experience of
Of
a
course.
community, and that's universal. And when you were talking about King David, it just reminded me that he apparently had a lot of fits of anger and fits of sort of bipolar outbursts. And apparently, one of the things that would calm him down was one of his servants to play the harp, or him play the harp himself. And apparently, those were moments when he would compose the Psalms, since they were all really songs. And
Yeah.
we just see the written poems that survived, but we didn't have recordings back then to actually hear how the
Yeah.
melodies were. But we definitely get an idea by looking at the traditions, the traditional Hebrew singing in synagogue, how it must have sounded like. Right.
Yes, definitely. We also know from the Bible that he had to play the harp for King Saul to calm down. King Saul used to have this
Oh, got it.
and
The
maybe
fifth.
yeah, the fits were, as the Bible says, that they were from
Uh-huh.
King Saul's.
And so
But
David would play the harp to calm King Saul
to
down.
call him, yeah.
Ah, nice. Learning something every day.
Yes. Now, but back to Bach, I don't think I now can play Ich rufe zu dir, although I love it. If you don't mind, I could play other things.
Sure.
It's just that I am not very sure if the computer is going to behave well. And I am such an old school kind of person. I should have printed it out because I had the music, but it's not here with me.
No
And
worries.
so I decided I don't want to. What I'll do is I'll play that on my next Sunday live thing. So if you want to just, I will start
Yes.
with that.
I like the sound of that, and I want to get the word out to folks. What time in the morning do you usually turn on your phone to play
Yeah,
on
at
Sunday?
9 a.m. Brazilian time, which is
All right.
7 a.m. for you guys. It's
All
very
right,
early.
folks. 7 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, the 16th of January, 2022. If you are awake at that time, go to Instagram and check out Simone Leitão. She's going to give you a beautiful morning concert to start your Sunday in the right way.
Yes, I just play. I speak some, but I basically play so that and like I said, the Christian music is the same everywhere.
Yeah,
So people are, and a lot of people who watch, they are not actually, they don't go to church or they don't even call themselves Christians, but they love it and they also
right.
they are blessed with it, like the music of Bach. I was going to say something about Bach that I find interesting is that when he was about to die, he was um, he was very sick and he was very ill and he had a problem in his eyesight. He could not see.
Right.
He was not being able to see well. So he asked one of his sons, of course, CPE, who was always with him. I always call him CPE, Carl Philipp Emanuel. He asked him to write down what he wanted to write. He says, okay, I have, of course, he had all these inspirations all the time. So he was writing down his music. And one day he woke up and he could see for just one day. So he wrote his very last piece, and he didn't even finish, which was a hymn. I need to find this chorale. It's a chorale, which is, I don't know exactly the name in German, but it says, "Oh Lord, here I am by your throne." I think you've
That's
heard this.
wonderful. Oh,
Yes.
Lord,
And then
here I
it's
am
like,
by your throne.
and then by like 2 days after he died.
Wow.
And yeah, so, and Carl Philipp wrote about that. He said, well, here, this was my last, my father's last chorale. So his last piece of music was a chorale. So it is so hard for me to talk about Bach because he's so present in my life. Ever since I was a little girl, I decided to play the piano because I loved his music. And I wanted to hear his music all the time. My father had a place in our home. Of course, so many brothers and sisters. We were 12, and I'm the youngest. And I would love to just refuge there and listen to his cantatas because he had the whole collection. And it is hard every time some people say, well, would you like to talk about Bach? I read about him, I meditate about his life, but I only learned with him. And I find it like I don't have words. I don't, you know, I only remember Shostakovich, who was himself an atheist. And he
Right.
said, yeah, it's amazing. Shostakovich said, Bach is humankind's best friend. I find in his music like friend. He's a friend.
Yeah,
And
and I mean it's no wonder that when the NASA folks decided to send a spaceship out into the universe unmanned just to see if they could find life in some other place, one of the artifacts that they included was a album of music by Bach as a representation of humankind's achievements. There were other artifacts, but in the realm of music and art, they chose to include an album of music of Bach. I think that's also is a perfect example of what you're talking about. And I agree with you as a musician that Bach has to be experienced not only by playing Bach, but also by listening to it. I think you really understand and feel the breadth and the scope of what Bach meant to us through his music. It's really hard to have a conversation about him biographically. That can easily be experienced by reading a book. But I think nowadays, when we have this format of podcasts and audios, people want to find almost like a shortcut, like an insight into, give me the whys and give me an example of this why, and I'll do the rest myself later. And so that's why I'm so grateful that you had a chance to play a little bit for us. And I would like to encourage you to continue doing these Sunday morning moments that you have on your social media, because I think the most important thing is to provide people with a context, with a little bit of access to why that music is so meaningful. And you're able to do that. You don't just play, you actually explain why and how and where and when, and then you give the music. So
yeah, I am very happy and very, very fortunate to have first the faith. I think that faith, I am sure that faith is a gift. And when you have, if you don't have, and if you'd like to have faith, ask.
Yeah.
Because it will be given to you. And when you have you walk with faith, everything else is just a matter of understanding, of learning, and getting to know the Lord closer, and getting to know yourself and your limits, and everything makes more sense. I basically think Bach had this life. He had a life of faith. Of course, he had so many, fails and falls like everybody, but he did have that. Once there was oh my God.
You're good with your phone there?
Hey.
Hello.
I'm here. I'm here.
Yes.
Yes. There was this story that, he had a fight once. He went to jail because he had a fight in front of the church, because someone said that he could not have his wife, because back then she was only his fiance, and he wanted her to sing. And so they said, well, she cannot sing because women cannot sing in this church. So he said, well, he will. At the end, he ended up fighting. And there was a story. I like to tell the stories just to say that he is human. He was human completely. So also that story that a duke wanted him to keep him. He wanted to leave. The duke wanted him to keep him. And so he took him to jail also, to say, well, you're going to stay here until you change your mind.
Yeah, because the Duke was employing Bach, right?
Yes, exactly. Employing Bach. He said, well, I'm going to another town now. I'm not going to, goodbye. Thank you very much. So the Duke, and he said, no, you're going to stay here. You're going to stay here. And so he was very happy. He just asked, okay, can you give me like a clavichord or a harpsichord, something? And then he was
just
writing,
so I can play in jail.
Yeah, exactly. And for him, I think it was good for a while to be there, because his family life was very busy. He had all these kids, and he looked like in his dinner table, he would only ask questions and quizzes and about music with all his kids. And unfortunately, the most talented of them all, he used to say, was Wilhelm Friedrich, who died quite young, because he was drinking too heavily. Yeah, and for Bach it was really hard. But another just less story.
Yeah.
His youngest daughter was called Regina. Forgot it was like two names that they don't match. Regina something. She was she lived a long life, but she never got married. So she lived until she was around 80 years old. She was quite poor, because her brothers were already gone and so on. Beethoven was then already famous, and he knew of that. So he decided to send her not money, but only the rights of the editions of some of his works. I think it was quartets and so on. He called his editors, I think it was Breitkopf and Hartel, and said, well, you should send her all the proceeds so she could live well until the very end of her life. Beautiful. Because he said she's royal. She's completely royalty.
She's royalty, yeah.
Yes, she could not live a life like that, which I think it is so beautiful of Beethoven too. Very generous, very generous.
I think he had a lot of empathy for what she was going through, having had the life experience that he had. And I believe it was Beethoven who said, I didn't wish to only entertain them. I wish to make them better.
So that's Beethoven-like.
He had the same desire to uplift people through his music, not just entertain people through his music, right?
Exactly.
So you could totally see how he would look at a Bach's daughter as a precious, lineage of a daughter of a king, in a way, right?
Yeah, he was.
Simone, okay. We're getting close to the end of our conversation, but I would love it if you could treat us to one final piece of music of your choosing, either by Bach or one of the Lutheran hymns. And then you could tell us a little bit about why you picked it, and then we can close the conversation with music.
Yes, I am. I don't like to say all that, because, Protestants, they have so many branches. There are so many branches. Now, once we cut with the Catholic Roman Church, they were like just all sorts of. So I was raised Presbyterian, and Presbyterian is very American, right? So the first ones that came to Brazil were Americans. And so there's this piece, it's a hymn. It was actually written in Sweden. Since I speak Norwegian, I can say the name of it in Swedish is Hvor stor er deg, which means how great thou art. And was also the hymn that Elvis Presley loved to sing, and even to the end of his life he loved to sing. So it's basically one of our hits, our Marseillaise, so to speak. So I will play How Great Thou Art.
Beautiful, thank you.
So if you are at home and you'd like to sing along, you can sing along.
Yes, please. Wow.
Yeah, this is so simple, but it talks to my soul so much. Yes, he's grand, he's great, and the music of Bach is also great.
Absolutely. Amen to that. We definitely felt it. Some of the most divine music is also the simplest, especially when it's interpreted in such a heartfelt way like you did just now. So
thank you so much, Fred. I thank you very much for having me once again. And I hope to see you again in the future in person. and of course in some of our digital
And
encounters.
for those that want to learn more about Simone, in our channel, we interviewed her last year in Portuguese. And if you want to see that interview and you speak Portuguese, look all the way down in the description of the YouTube video. You're going to find the link of our conversation in Portuguese, where Simone talks more about her life, her journey, her current works and projects, and all the different things that she's got in store. And this interview soon will also be available in an English translation. And so please like and subscribe our channel, Spirit Reflections, with the little lotus flower on the logo. And tell us how we can bring this channel into more comforting, enlightening, and provocative content for spiritual reflections. And so, Simone, we're going to close with the vignette that we were gonna open, but I was having technical difficulties here. But until next time, big hug to you all, your family. God bless. Happy New Year.
God bless you.
And we'll see you on Sunday mornings in your channel for some beautiful worship music with the birds singing.
With the birds singing. Yes. Thank you.
Take
Bye
care.
bye. God bless you.
Thank you, everybody. God bless.
Bye.